First presentation today will be held by Rasmus Olsen. He's our colleague and associate professor in the Department of Electronic Systems. His research also includes smart grids, and he's been working on a project called Smart City Direct, and which is in its final stages, and he will today present some experiences and research challenges that they had during the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvia. So, good morning and welcome to all of you. So, as Silvia said, I've been working for the last couple of years in this project, Smart C2Net, where a large portion of this presentation will be taken from. So, I hope that you learn a little bit about what we're doing here. It's not all, but we're much more, but try to be selective around what we some of the more interesting and novel parts. I would like, before I start, give a little bit background. I know you had yesterday already some basic stuff, but I would like to talk about some of the higher layer stuff, because some of the problems that we have experienced in the network is caused also by some of the more higher layer protocols like TCP and UDP. So I just like to give you a little bit sketching up the framework when we talk about communication networks. I have a little bit about communication standards, because we also kind of dictate the roles that and the possibilities that we have. But my main focus point would in fact be the two last points here. Something about the Smart C2Net project, and in particular focusing on two use cases, namely event-driven voltage control and the role of communication technologies in here, and a case on electrical vehicle and mobility impact on the control and loops, where we also look at what impact and influence the network would have. But first, because I was not super aware of all of everybody had the same background, I would like to start out with a little bit of basic. Now, when we talk about communication networks, we are usually referring to this model called the OSI model, which, strictly speaking, divides different functionality into different layers. So we have at the bottom the physical, that's the cables and so on. We have the first layer where we trying to control this medium. Then going up in the structure, we have functionalities focusing around how to use this media effectively. Then we need to worry about how to send data packets not across single links but many links, which is handled in the network. Then we have to worry about not only transporting data packets, but also the whole data streams and so on. And we move up through the layers for different functionalities. But the key ones that I want to focus on is relying on laying in layer 3 and layer 4, which is, besides all the physical stuff here, the main parts of what we know as the TCP/IP model. So the problems that happen here leads to basically stochastic delays because of buffering. I will talk a little bit more about that. And one of the key challenges that we have been trying to address in this project relates to the fact that you have these stochastic delays coming from different networks and different mechanisms of handling these data packets, and how do we address those in smart grid context. I would like to also refresh your memory that in this layered structure we have a very important aspect focusing on data encapsulation. So when we want to send some data as an application, that could be the smart meter, that could be the controller, could also be just some web service, whatever. We are adding, for each time we go down the stack, a little bit of data information. So I could send some HTTP protocol this data, which could be encrypted with the protocol TLS, which is using the TCP protocol based on IP, and the further we get down into the protocol, we get more and more physical header regarding all the other stuff here as data. So, as a part of this structured approach, you see that we add overhead just to transport this data. Of course, one of the big problems is to reduce this overhead, but as we want to move packets not just one link, but several links, we need additional information to do so. A lot regarding the data standards that we'll be talking about is focusing much about how we structure the data in here, so that we can understand each other at an application level, but also on what type of protocols do we use in order to be able to communicate with the different entities. It's so, just as a refreshing, you heard about it yesterday, probably, so just to refresh your minds. The first layer, the physical layer, is responsible for transporting the bits. So basically we're talking about a couple of paradigms. We can use cables, fibers, electric signals, or we could use wireless technologies based on the electromagnetic frequency spectrum. And well, each of these types of paradigms have different pros and cons. Of course, when we talk about cable technology, we talk about deployment of cables. Somebody has to go and dig these cables. While with wireless, we can set up stations, and we are much more free to reconfigure if we want to reconfigure the physical topologies. So all these things, I'm not going too much into detail here. I hope you had some really good lectures, I'm pretty sure you had. On the data link, focusing on managing this physical layer, so basically ensuring that we can have multiple devices using the same physical medium. We split data into manageable chunks such that we don't occupy the media all the time for sending large amounts of data. We fix errors and detect them using different types of coding mechanisms and so on. So all these practical aspects related to the properties coming from the physical media is being handled. And the idea, of course, is that the layers above is not seeing these effects in a perfect world. But at the end of the day, we would still see some effects. Sometimes we cannot rely on error detection and correction code. Packets are simply destroyed too much for us to understand them, so we may be lost. There may be too many devices on the network, so packets are colliding. So at the end of the day, at some point in time, we may experience that things are not going as we intended, so we may lose packets. So we have to live with that and try to address that first. I'll come back to that. That's a part of what comes next. Now, at the end of the day, we're not always just interested in transporting packets between two links, but we need to transport data across the links, and this is where the network layer comes into play. So basically what we are focusing on here is problems related to taking data packets from here and forward them through the network of devices until it reaches destination. So addressing schemes and routing is quite an important issue here. And also the fact that we may have networks of networks, so not necessarily the same type, is of course affecting the performance of this, and there may be different traffic that occupies these servers here, such that we have at the end of the end-to-end effect delays from packets being sent here to here, are not necessarily the same, because packets may have to wait a little bit here to be sent over here, and wait a little bit here before it can be sent over here, and finally reach its destination. So, in that sense, what is going on is when we want to send data, we take our data here, fragment it into packets, send it into our system. So we could send some packets over here, which forwards to this one, which forwards to this one, which forwards to this one, and we receive our packets here. We could also send it alternatively over here. It does not really matter so much as long as we get our packets to the right destination. I kind of indicated that situation for each of these routers here could be different load situations, so this could be heavily loaded, so packets coming in here have to wait a long time in this queue, or it could simply be dropped because it has too many packets in the queue. So even at this layer, when we talk about a network, we're still talking about potential drops of packets. So there are different issues and different ways to deal with that. We could address also a type of quality of service at this layer where we treat packets differently, send them to different queues there or different networks. There's a lot of work ongoing with that, and has been for many years. So I don't want to go too much into detail here. Just to sketch out the problem that what we experience with the sending data packets from here to here is related to the load of the network, the networks, and we may not always know what networks the packets are going through, and we may even lose packets. Of course, we could say, what if we use our own infrastructure? We don't have any cross traffic, then the situation, of course, may be different. That's costly and will not be feasible. We have the next layer here to secure and address some of these problems. So basically, what we want to offer at this layer is to provide not only one source of information, the possibility to send data packets to a destination, but multiple sources. We take our laptop here, there are many services running here which uses one IP address, so therefore it ensures that internally here data packets are distributed to the right application. But the two transport protocols, European TCP works here and has different functionalities and different objectives besides just making sure that we get our data from one to another. UDP is literally just ensuring that we can send the package from a device to another without guarantees as fast as possible. So that's popular, the way to set that. TCP is a bit more complicated because here we want to achieve a little bit more. We want to be sure that the data packets actually arrive, so if we lose some, this protocol keeps track of what has been sent and what has been received, and then we try to retransmit as we go along, and we detect loss of packets. So it will give us a much more reliable data transmission. For larger portions of data, we also have flow control. But another interesting aspect of this protocol is that we can order data packets. That means receive the packets in the same order as we send them. This is not the case with UDP, and it has some interesting properties when we talk about smart grid, because obviously if two set points to an entity are being reordered during the data forwarding, then you want to be sure that you use the latest one. Yes, so this is basically captured here. So with UDP we get a best of effort transport from A to B. Packets may be lost. It's fairly simple. as fast communication in networks as it allows us. But with TCP we get a more reliable organized data transport from A to B. No packets are lost, missing or detected are resent. So that also means that the delay we experience when we get the data through TCP are usually a bit longer. But on the other hand, we don't drop package unless we are physically disconnected our server. Yes, just a few words on the two other layers because there's some interesting aspects also focused in this layer. So the session layer is basically to provide mechanisms for opening, controlling, and closing sessions. And typically users are authorization, access control, no procedure calls, secure shells, and so on. The idea here is mainly that, in particular for the smart grid related to application layer, authorization and access control and security are in focus around here. Then, just shortly on the presentation, mainly on formatting, data formatting, encryption, decryption of data, data compression are located often quickly in this layer. Then we, on top of have that application, or application is, but typically we want to also put some services like dynamic DHCP, is located DNS, and so on. So, but I'm not going too much into that. But a super short refreshment of the whole protocol stack here. Of course, we could talk much more in detail and much longer on it, but the point is that we experience several problems caused by the protocol stacks that we are using, and we have to deal with them in some way. And it boils down to that there's a delay and there's a potential of losing packets. Because we are not interested in losing our packets, obviously, because that means losing measurements or losing set points. On the other hand, if things have been delayed too much, then we also in a bit of trouble. So, in essence, we have to concern two things. Either we can use existing communication technologies that are there, what is already out there, fine. We don't have to deploy new stuff, but we have to live with the fact that we are probably sharing this medium with others, meaning that we have all sorts of issues with the number of devices in here, but we also have different cross-traffic that affects the end-to-end performance. Or we could invest in our own infrastructure. I know some companies have done so because they don't trust the network operator. That gives them the benefit that we can control, of course, the traffic themselves, can schedule their own traffic and so on. We don't have interfering traffic for routing our database. But of course, then you have to make an investment, you have to maintain it yourself and so on. So, but at the end of the day, we still have to worry about the end-to-end connection from the source to the destination. And finally, either way, whatever we approach, we need to worry a little bit about all the standards, because when we talk about smart grid and communication, we need to agree how we talk to each other, how the devices talk to each other, what data formats are being used, what mechanism, what interfaces are there, and there's a whole slew of standards that are defining this. And they also include some interesting timing perspectives that I just want to mention here. Another issue, and that's related to my last part of the talk today, is how do we tackle the issue that the different layers are not offering us a complete reliable operation, how can we tackle this? And in particular, when we focus on existing shared communication technologies, how do we tackle this non-deterministic element that we have, and can we even do something? So that kind of very, very briefly summarize and just introduce the settings of the problem that we're trying to address here, namely causing by the different networks and the different mechanisms that we have and the different protocols, mainly the TCP or TCP-like protocols and UDP or UDP-like protocols. How is that affecting our communication, and how does that affect, at the end of the day, the different things we want to achieve by two example use cases here, and what can we actually do about it. But before that, I have a couple of slides regarding standards. It's a little bit boring to just go through this, but I would still like to say a few words, because it is a very important part of understanding some of the limitations and some of the challenges that we are facing. Of course, we talk about standards in different levels, in the different layers of the OSINT model, and we start from the bottom. We talk about technologies and data rates, coverage, range, application types that can support these. So for example, you could take some of these known technologies here. We use some spectrum, we have some data rate, some coverage, and typical applications and limitations. And that could be mapped into different, because once you have the standard defining this is so fast, of course what you observe is not necessarily what you define theoretically. And when you start to measure, you would also see that there are some latencies and some packet loss associated to the different technology. I'm not going to give you a very walkthrough here, but the point of this is to illustrate that the different technologies have different characteristics, different types of packet loss and latency at the lower layer, which of course will have an effect as we move along. When we go a bit higher up, we start also to go into more concerns about the data exchange itself. So just to mention a few here, some of the IEC standards which are really well used. There are some focused on energy management system here. This 61968 and 61970 defines a common information model for data exchange between the devices and networks in the power distribution domain. So why I will mention this and this information security and inter-control center communication is because once we start to work with this, we have to be aware and understand what are the components out there, what kind of language are we talking, because we would, at the end of the day, be the first focus when we talk about data exchange between these entities. So it is worth, and there are quite many, for example this 61850, which is focused on substation automation, which not only defines the communication between devices, but also puts down some timing requirements for different types of application. Messages requiring immediate action, for example, would be defined, would be constrained by a 3 millisecond time delay, or 10 milliseconds, or 20 or 100 milliseconds, whether the message is defined as A or B message. And we see other timing requirements as we go along here. which kind of indicates that for the type of purpose we want to focus on functionality-wise, we also have to worry about how long time thing has to take. In particular, those short time interval, obviously, when we talk about a general purpose network, we would have a difficulty in meeting some of these requirements, while when we're talking about 1,000 milliseconds, not strict, then yes, we can talk about being more realistic in terms of at least sometimes. And so there are different, IEEE has some standards here. For example, here substation automation again, mentioning some timings from ranging from milliseconds to minutes intervals. And also here, going into details, there's some signals for switchgear protection, event notification, and so on. And there are many, many more, and in particular I would like, if you really are going to work with this, to focus on this website, smartgridstandardsmap.com, if you don't know it. There's a whole view on different components defined in the power world, which literally when you move your mouse across these elements, you get a little window with all the associated standards and relevant standards for that, which is a very, very good help to get an overview of what is out there and what is related to that. Otherwise, it can be quite difficult to see what standards belong to. Yes. Now, I think I want to talk about this point before we're taking a short break, because actually the larger part of the presentation is here. So I would like to say some words about our project Smart City, which basically the idea behind it was coming from the fact that we wanted to be able to reuse existing communication infrastructure, taking into account that what we experience here is not deterministic but stochastic and time varying and not so easy to work with, but cheap off-the-shelf components. We could use off-the-shelf communication protocols that are well tested and so on. Together with the communication standards, we wanted to see what can we actually achieve and can we construct a system that provides a reliable service that we need to operate a smart grid system. So in 2012, December 2012, I think it was, we started this project, which consists of 7 partners. Vodafone Italy, FSEC, grid component manufacturer from Portugal, RC Italian Research Institute for Energy Technology, TU Dortmund, German University, Tech company producing software failure detection mechanism, FTW, Vienna coordinating the project, and then Aalborg University, represented by our energy department, control and network section at the electronic systems. So with that partnership, we started up this project here, which conceptually wanted to look at what we would say is a two-loop operation. One is focusing around the energy and electricity grid control algorithm, which interacts with sensors, smart meters, and actuators in a control loop. This forms an outer loop, which is running on top of a network where we are able to monitor what is going on in the network, assess what are the types of delays and packet losses that we are experiencing in this loop, and then try to adjust different quality of service parameters and protocol configuration in order to support the outer loop operation here. And the interesting part, well, there's several ones. First of all, we wanted to look at this loop here, develop new strategies. We wanted to look at how we could do this effectively in here. And we want also to see what is the interaction between the network reconfiguration and the energy control. So these are the three main items, and under consideration that there could be accidental faults in the network, there could be malicious attacks to some of the entities in here, so DDoS and so on. And during runtime, of course, this network here is loaded more or less depending on the usage of all the other connected entities. So this is our background and what we had in mind back then. We have a much more updated view now, but basically our idea was relying on the fact that we would develop some middleware to observe what is going on and try to reconfigure things based on the known interfaces and the known protocols that is available to us, and then provide an interface towards the adaptive grid control algorithms up here, and then such that we could serve this loop here, the energy distribution grid, sensors and actuators, and then the grid control. Yes, in order to do that, we focused our work into a monitoring framework for gathering network state information. That means detecting how well are packets being transported through our network, how often do we lose packets, and can we maybe adapt some of these routing tables via software-defined networks and so on. Can we do something based on diagnosis of the network if a link is completely broken down, or then we need to change maybe network interface? Can we do something here? But also looking a little bit at the higher level, I will come back to that. Can we do something about how do we access information and adapt to this, for example, by adjusting update frequency. Then we also would like to look at control strategies for different services in the grid. We will hear about that much more later today. But basically we wanted to be sure that whatever control strategy we take is also able to adapt to the fact that due to the end-to-end performance, we cannot always guarantee a strict timely deadline, but we have to adapt to that. So this we wanted to put in. And then we wanted to, of course, assess these by setting up a set of test beds. We have one here in Aalborg, but FTW and IFC have two. And we have several simulation frameworks going on. And of course we wanted to do that by use cases, and we're focusing on medium voltage control and self-optimized low voltage grid, where I would, in the second part, focus on the low voltage part. As a part of our initial work, we set out to analyze and study different use cases and came up with a set of requirements which I kind of focused here on the type of services that one should hopefully be able to offer when we talk about smart grids. So for example, when deploying things out here, whether it's new assets or whether it's smart meter, you need things to work in a zero configuration approach means that automatically when you install it, the guy installer should not put in too much information. System should be able to detect and automatically become a part of the control loops. So that means some discovery mechanisms, some setup, initial negotiation, but also maintenance when sending out updates is needed, reconfiguration of the system needs to take into account. Of course, scalability in terms of load distribution of the controllers are important. Extensibility is important because obviously you don't deploy a full system at a time, but slowly you build it up. Interoperability is important also at the service layer because different vendors have different protocols that we need to interact with, different understandings of standards affects how we interact with these. There are some requirements on synchronization because this operation here needs to be synchronized in time with respect to what's going on out here, logging and backup for security, security and access control, reconfiguring command control, and then what is important here is the bidirectional communication because we need to be able to provide set points and receive information regarding the state of the system out here. So it's not only important as we have, as most cases in DSL, a higher upload stream than downstream. For example, we need to be able to hit the voltage. So yeah, things are happening, but within some certain boundaries, we don't do anything. We just leave the grid alone. But at some point, we exceed some threshold level, or we go below a threshold level, and then we start saying, okay, now we need to do something. Now we need to send a new set point to the PV panel, or the wind turbine, or the battery, or whatever, or the low voltage grid controller here, in order to bring our voltage down and definitely ensure that we don't exceed some hard limit up here. So what we want to do is to ensure that we're only controlling in this period, and we want to do it at the right time, and we want to use whatever flexibility that we have in here. With respect to this flexibility, I'm talking about, say, the wind is blowing so much, but the wind turbine is only operating at half the capacity, then we could talk about flexibility that we could either turn it all the way down, so reducing by so much power, or we could add so much power into the system, given that we are at a given set point. So when I'm talking about flexibility, this is the type of things that I'm talking about. But it means that what we are worried about is some event-triggered type of control mechanism. So an event measured by a sensor somewhere here, it literally starts this control process and continues until we detect that now the voltage is back in our boundary again. And in order to do so, there are two things that we want to worry about, and I want to show that there's some trade-off to be done here to proper adjust things. So the first one is the response time, basically the time it takes from we detect the event here until we have a reaction, until we have brought down the voltage. We could call that the response time. And what I would call the correctness of information, because to do so, as I mentioned, I need to use the flexibility of the other assets, but because of different changes and this information about the flexibility changes over time, and in combination with the type of stochastic delays that we have in the network, we may have not correct information, and if the controller uses information that is not correct, we risk to take wrong decision, and we risk that the voltage go even further up do damage on the system, or we don't do anything at all. So these two elements we identified as being some of the two critical points that I'm going to talk about. Now, this is the system here, indicating different entities over here. So an asset, which has some software part of our system called a monitoring component, software communicating things. So these are physical assets with such a piece of software on top. And then we have the voltage controller up here. And in between we have a communication network where we don't necessarily know everything about it. What we know is that when we send the event notification here, we detect it here, we send it to the controller. Now it's time to activate the control. Then all we know is that it takes some time for it to be received up here, and that time is stochastic by some distribution. So it might arrive here, it might arrive a bit later, and a bit before. We don't really know. All we know is that it takes some time and it's stochastic. Then at this point we could say, okay, the controller now needs to do something. But before we do anything, we need to know how much flexibility do we have in our system, so we could send a request to the different assets out there, how much flexibility. We could ask the wind turbines, how much can you tune up, how much can you tune down. We could ask the PV kind of the same, and so on, all in number of assets. And we could get a reply up here, and based on that, our controller could determine our use points to the different assets and send them here and here. The characteristics again being that we're using a network where the delays are stochastic, so we don't necessarily know when the requests are coming here and when a response come back and when are these set points. So the whole time for this initial response to the voltage event is not known as such. We know it's stochastic, but and that's of course a bit of the challenge. Now, once we set the set points and we start the whole process, we enter what we call the periodic control. So what we're doing is, with some time interval, we are getting information about the state of the flexibility, and we adjust the set points here. And over time, hopefully, we get another event here at the sensor saying that now the voltage has gone below our threshold and we are in an okay state, which means that the controller up here leaves the system and it enters an idle mode, and we just leave the system alone. So in that way, conceptually, we would like to operate off grid. So seen from a communication point of view, of course, there is the guys who designed the control up here, and those in building the assets here needs to be aware of this. But from a communication point of view, it would look something like this. So with that in mind, we are going into the first phase, because these two parameters, namely the response time and the correctness of the information, as I mentioned, are two critical metrics that we are going to focus on here. So the first phase is simply from the event starts to the first initial response has begun, and the second phase is from the first periodic signal has started until we are stopping this periodic time control. Now, what happens? We can do things in several ways, but what basically happens, and this is just illustrating what I showed before, the event is being detected, we are sending the notification up here, and then we are asking our assets what are your flexibility, and we get a response back. Then we are calculating new set points and we're sending that to the asset. Please use the set points. In between, there may be things happening. The wind starts to blow higher, a cloud passes by, so the solar panel produces less. Some sort of events that change this information happens at random point in time, so also a stochastic process. And now we want to ask ourselves, basically, given that we're sending the response of the flexibility right here, which is used in the control algorithm here to determine the set point, what is the probability of not having an event in here? Because if we don't have an event in this time interval, then we can say safely that our calculated set point up here is valid down here and is matching our expectation. If some event happened down here, we are no longer safe because something has changed, which means that the set point calculated up here is potentially not matching what the system actually would need, and that means that we may be sending a wrong or less optimal set point down here, which ultimately would cause problems for the stability of the grid. We don't necessarily know, but at least if this is not happening, then we can say that. The two parameters I was talking about is the response time, which is measured for this case, at the point in time when the event happened, until we have our first iteration. So this time interval is what we would call response time, and the other time relevant is time from we send the response till we get the set point, which is called the mismatching time. And why it's called that is because this is being used to calculate the metric we call the mismatch probability, namely the probability that we have this being here. So these two times are quite critical to analyze, and for this case it's fairly simple because we can see in this case what we're doing is we can just take the delay here, assuming we are using very little time here. We can say this time here is calculated as the sum of two stochastic variables, and if we assume we are independent, then it's fairly easy to calculate the distribution of this one. And the same thing for the total time here, because it's then becomes the sum of this, and this, in order to get the total time distribution. Another way of doing things is to be a little bit ahead of time, saying that whenever an event happens here, or here, then we are sending a notification to the controller. I changed now my flexibility information, so I'm sending you an information, meaning that at the point in time when you are receiving the notification of the voltage event, we already know what is the available flexibility, and we can quickly compute the set point and send it to the asset that we wish to change operation for. This is nice. The response time is much less because it's just the time from the event happens until the set point has been reached. That's our initial response. But this mismatching time is a bit longer since it's the time from you receive the set point here from the last time we had an updated event, and in this case this would be here, but the event is here, so it would be a longer time period. What we don't want is that an event happens in between here and is currently in transit in the network before it's reached, because that means something has changed here, which would make our set point here not optimal, and again similar to the last case, it would potentially jeopardize our calculated set point and the stability of the grid. So we calculate here the mismatch probability of this, the probability of this happen via knowing the time distribution of this here. It is also worth mentioning that as opposed to the first case where the network traffic is only triggered when we need it, that is when the event is happening here, then this is triggered by every time flexibility changes. So potentially we trigger a lot of unnecessary traffic. If these voltage events are rare, then we may be sending a lot of unnecessary events. So there's already here some initial trade-off. The last method commonly used also is to periodically send just some point in time with some predefined time interval. Most normally it's deterministic, but here I show not so deterministic, as more of a mathematical modeling issue. But the point is that we send updates over the network to a controller with a certain time period, independent of when the event happens. We're just hoping that when we need the information at this point to calculate the set point, then we have the correct information. So the response time is again very short because we can immediately use what is cached up here from the previous update over here. But, well, since we're using the last updated information as our basis for this, then well, this mismatch in time is defined by this from the last useful update up to here. And knowing the distribution for that is the key to also tell the probability of missing one of these events here. And in this case, we can control the network traffic by simply adjusting the rate at which we're sending these updates. That would have an effect on the type of traffic pattern we're pushing onto the communication networks, and at the end of the day, the load saturation and so on. Now, if we come to having this into some numerical values, we can see that we would get very different approaches of distribution, time distributions given the different approaches. Now, analytically, for the reactive, that was the first one, is simply the convolution of the up and downstream, presumably dependent delays. And the periodic gets a little bit more complicated because it's a convolution with up, down, and what we call a cache time. But for the proactive event case, it's actually very, very complicated. We don't even know. We haven't been able to find the distribution, but we can simulate it. And this is shown up here for the case where we are simply assuming exponential delays just to have something simple. For the reactive, it's a fairly simple Lamian 2 distribution, and for the periodic, it becomes a little bit more complex, which includes also the update rate himself, the update rate. So it means we could plot the distribution of this time along the x-axis and then the density, probability density up here, and we see the reactive is the red one, has the lowest mean, whereas the green one, the proactive event-driven, has a slightly higher mean and slightly different shape, whereas the blue has a higher mean and also a slightly different shape. Again, this shape on the blue depends then to a high degree on the rate that you choose. So you can have it to look differently, or you can have it to look at, you can have the mean go this way and the other way. Now, of course, you want a low mean because the less time, this mismatch time, the less likely it is that you have mismatching information. Now, so in this case, it looks like it's always the reactive one we should have because it has the lowest mean value. It has a nice shape compared to the others. But is it always so? If we take and plot the distribution for the response time, so the time from the event happened till the system has given a response, there's a different answer. So the different distributions of the times are given here. And we see the green and the blue ones are the two proactive, and they are literally the same. There's a little bit of a simulation that gives some negative numbers. You can do it apart from that. But the red one is very different. It has much higher mean, meaning that the response time we get from the reactive is much higher compared to the two proactive, which is natural because once the event is detected, you need to ask the different assets, so you need to spend valuable time asking what is the flexibility, which gives grounds to the increased delay. You don't have to do that with the others because you're relying on the caches being in shape. So it will be a trade-off between whether we have a high mismatch time distribution or a high response time. And when we're linking this to how fast the information change, it becomes really interesting. And this is where we have this notion of mismatch probability, because now we're taking into account also how often and what is the nature of change on the event for the flexibility information that we want to detect. Now we have a simple model here by a Markov chain indicating a set of states like this, so you can jump up and you can jump down in this chain depending on whether you're gaining more flexibility or you're losing flexibility. And that can be described by some generator matrix. And based on that, we can then define and calculate the conditioned probability of having a mismatch given a certain time passed since you observe the information, and that can be mapped into what we call the mismatch probability by summing up all the possible times of the time distribution that we saw before. And this is where the mismatch distribution time comes into play. And this is coming from the generator matrix, so basically stating something about, given that we are at time t here, what is the probability that we move to a lower state of flexibility. Now, why we wanted only to focus on moving to a less state of flexibility is because if the controller believes we have, say, 1 kilowatt of or 10 kilowatts of flexibility, fine, but fine if we then have 20, we may not be optimal, but at least you're not saturating the system. But if you suddenly jump to 5 or 2 kilowatts and believing it's 10 kilowatts, then you may be introducing an unknown saturation in the system, which is not so good. So what we want to say is that literally the probability of that happening, so moving to a less state. And that is calculated by this summation. At the end of the presentation, I have references to all the papers that we have published in this question. So you can read more about the details there, and you can, of course, always ask us. Now, how does it look when we start to take this into account? This is just some examples where we're saying, okay, we ran the mean delay that we observed in the network, and we are plotting the mismatch probability for a 20-state asset with some rate. In this case, it's 1. It's not, it's just an example. It's not related to what we would probably expect from a real-world case. And then we plot the proactive periodic with a given update rate, reactive and proactive event simulated. And we see there is a difference between the two protocols, the three approaches. So in this case, it's a proactive event-driven case provides us the best performance. But again, you have to remember that to use this, which seems more reliable, you also have to pay in a constant traffic as we go along. So the reactive again only triggers network traffic when we need it, and the blue we can actually control how much traffic. So it's not sure if you look at reliability we have a clear answer, but if you look at the traffic as well, the speed influence also potentially the delay, things becomes a little bit more complex. We could also say, okay, what about the information model? Now we took 20 state as an example before, but what if we varied that so we want very fine granular information? Then what does that mean? Now here's an example where we change the number of states in the model. So 200 states means that we have a fine granular discretization of the information, and down to 2010 we have a very rough state definition. And not surprisingly, we see as we increase the resolution or granularity, we also increase the likelihood of becoming out of sync with the information, so mismatching state. So also here's a trade-off between we want very accurate information, we pay in terms of being more likely not to have the information correctly, as if we go to a more coarse information description, then we are also more likely for it to be true. So where to balance that is also a question of what we need. Now this one shows in regards to the ability to affect this mismatch probability by tuning how often are we sending updates. So we measure that in network traffic in packets per second. We see the blue and the green one relating to the reactive and the event-driven case are fixed. Obviously, if we change the update rate, we cannot fix, we do not affect these two, so we are just fixed at some point. But when we're changing the periodic, we get something like this. So we see we can decrease this mismatch probability, we can even have a better performance than the others, but we have to pay really badly in terms of updates per second. So the message is here, yes, we can get even better performance in terms of reliability, but we have to pay in terms of the traffic and the load that we put on the network. And this framework allows us to do this numerically. So the question is, which strategy should be used? This one we just saw, this one is the one where we vary mean delay, and this is basically mapping the mean response time versus the resulting MMPR. So you could trade off, say, okay, I would like to have of course, a low mean response time, a low mismatch probability, and end up with a green. And currently it looks the same thing over here. The green seems to be often generally the best reliability, although not so much in difference as a function of the mean delay, and also over here in terms of network traffic. However, it should be mentioned again, if you go to a high resolution, that means that we need to trigger events often. That means that this picture over here may not be so clear anymore, because then we would generally trigger a lot of more traffic. So at the end of the day, I don't think there's any clear picture, although there are some indications that this proactive event-driven approach is one of the more useful ones. In the project, we have also been looking a bit on adaptive schemes, and basically what that has meant from the networking point of view is we wanted to see, okay, when we're starting our event, here, we get these response times here. How long should we wait for potential responses to be obtained here? Because we could have a situation where these delays are so long that it makes no sense to wait for all the information to come back. But then the question is, how long should we wait? So before we are making our decisions to perform the and provide the set point, so we call it the waiting time. And the other option is to say, okay, we don't need to send immediately after a period here all the data. We could also wait a little bit, but if we wait too long, then we miss the deadline. So the question is, given that delays are stochastic, what should our offset be? This is some of the optimization problems that we've been trying to address in the project. And to start with the second part here is basically the periodic time. So we have some deadline, the controller that operates in the periodic approach here. And then the question is, if we push the information, then by how much time should we do that in advance, such that the information is fresh for the controller while it is not being delayed too much and we miss the deadline. Or we could say the controller is requesting and getting the response, then how long time ahead in time should we do that before we need the information. Of course that relates, which of these approaches relates to what standard and what communication protocol is actually being used, or what is that dictating. And here are some mathematical model here, I'm not going into detail, and some assumptions on the song processes. Then we can actually make some interesting conclusions that we do find some optimal value between sending too early so the information is not matching when the controller is using it, and sending it too late such that we are not making it in time. And for the two different approaches, it's interesting here to see that we have, first of all, two different optimal time values, but also two different levels. So at the end of the day, we use this to find out then what is our optimal point to offset the data transmission to overcome this stochastic network delay. Of course, everything will change if we start to change the type of information that we are addressing and the type of network, the type of delays and so on. So this is just one case, but in the paper we have some more details on how this is done. We implemented this and tried to effectuate it in a simple case of a control system where we had given here, not going into the description, we are seeing now my time is running out even, and I just want to finish at least this example. But the point is, we have a setup where we measure voltages along the lines. We are set up with some solar panels, some wind turbines, and some given network communicating signals that feeds information into the controller, and we call it the set points, and we provide it back. And our target is to not exceed a certain threshold, and in this work we can then measure the simulated setup, voltages and different processes. Now when we apply some of these mechanisms here, we see if we don't do anything, we will have a voltage profile along one of the buses that looks like this. But if we just try to access it in our baseline scenario, then we get green. But if we try to apply some of these effects, then we could see that we will actually be able to just by adjusting these offset times, that we would overcome some of the problems caused by the network. So we could actually gain quite a lot in this experiment. Yes, I'm sorry, but I don't think I'll be able to finish the second example. It's a little bit similar, but focusing on electrical vehicle. But the slides will be available on the training school system. So I think with that I need to conclude here. Sorry for not making everything in time. But yes, any quick questions?
The software, the simulation software you have used, is a combination of power engineering software and communication software?
Yes, I think we used, is it eSpace?
eSpace.
Yes, as a part of it, and then we had linked it with some communication emulator software that emulated the signal being delayed to a controller running in MATLAB. And the other. So, but I think the setup is described much more in the paper. I have at the last here a list of the papers where I'm using, and you will have access to these references. Yes.